Hello, I'm Barbara Grosh, President of the League of Women Voters of the Rochester metropolitan area. The League is pleased to be a co-sponsor and contributor to this 2022 election debate with the candidates for New York's 25th Congressional District. The League is a nonpartisan political organization that does not support or oppose candidates or political parties. We encourage informed and active participation in government and believe informed voters are the backbone of our democracy. We are grateful to WROC-TV News 8 for presenting this program and remind viewers that voter registration for this election closes October 14th and early voting starts October 29th. For more information on the candidates who will be on your ballot, you can visit the League's online voter guide at vote411.org. At Vote411, you can find which candidates are running in the districts you live in and learn more about them. You can also learn about Proposition 1, the Clean Water, Clean Air, and Green Jobs Environmental Bond Act of 2022. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. News 8 is your local election headquarters. I'm Adam Chodak. Thank you so much for joining us this evening for this debate. I want to thank, of course, the League of Women Voters for partnering with us once again. Both the League and News 8 believe wholeheartedly that debates are essential for democracy, which is why I want to thank both candidates for participating tonight and for running for office. Doing that, to me, is a public service in and of itself. Speaking of running for office, Election Day is fast approaching. Tuesday, November 8th. Mark it on the calendar if you don't have it there already. It is just over a month away. And with that, I'd like to introduce to you the two candidates running for the 25th Congressional District seat. Looking at your screen on the left side, we have Congressman Joe Morelle, a Democrat, and then on the right side, we have former Rochester Police Chief Singletary, a Republican. We also have a live studio audience in-house tonight. We're very grateful for that. We have requested that they remain silent throughout the debate except at the end, and we have offered up the opportunity for them to express their enthusiasm for the candidates if they want to do so right now. All right. There we go. Before we get going, I want to go over a couple ground rules. I'm going to ask a specific question to a specific candidate. That candidate will have a minute and a half to answer. His opponent will then have a minute to respond. So a minute and a half, then a minute, then an extra 30 seconds if a candidate wants to add something, and we'll go from there. That's the question part. We're going to begin, though, with opening statements. Each campaign drew from a hat to determine the order. Congressman Joe Morelle is going to start with his opening statement now.
Good evening. I want to thank Channel 8 and the League of Women Voters for hosting this debate and giving us the opportunity to talk about the issues that matter most to our community. My story is no different than many of the people I represent. Growing up, my family lived modestly, but what mattered most were the values we believed in. I was taught that if you have the opportunity to help others, you also have an obligation to do it. That's why I fight so hard every day to deliver real solutions to the problems we face. Whether it's fighting to bring down the cost of prescription drugs, cracking down on illegal guns on our streets, or protecting access to reproductive care, you can always count on me to stand by and stand up for our community. We live in challenging times, and this is one of the most critical elections of our lifetime. Tonight, you'll see how my opponent and I differ dramatically on a host of important issues. It has been a great honor and a privilege to represent you in Congress, and I hope to earn your support to continue serving the community I love. Thank you.
Congressman Morelle, thank you so much. The next opening statement is from Mr. Singletary.
First, I'd like to thank Adam Chodak, WROC, and the League of Women Voters for hosting this debate. In just 36 days, you, the voter, will have an opportunity to choose a representative who stands for public safety, economic prosperity, and educational excellence. Right now, we are experiencing surging crime and record murders. Inflation continues to crush our seniors, families, and small businesses. When parents have a choice, students have a chance. Education is the closest thing to magic in America, and Joe Morelle has robbed our children of that opportunity. Joe Morelle is not the solution to our problems. Joe Morelle is the problem. Joe Morelle has tried to define me as someone who wants to take away a woman's right. Joe has tried to paint me as extreme. Joe is wrong, and nothing could be further from the truth. Let me be clear. I am not trying to take away a woman's right. I am personally pro-life and believe in the 3 exceptions. I want all women, especially black women, to have the resources and help they need to make a choice they want to make, not one they are forced into. For the past 3 decades, Joe Morelle has been a part of a narrative within a socioeconomic system where a woman believes her only alternative is to kill her unborn child. The 25th Congressional District is the 2nd worst congressional district to live in for African Americans. Nearly half of all the children in Rochester live in poverty. The zip code 14605 in Northeast Rochester is the poorest zip code in the city and the 2nd poorest in the entire state. And Joe Morelle has been silent on these issues. I have given you the facts. I gave you the issues, and throughout this debate, I look forward to providing solutions to the problems that Joe Morelle and Nancy Pelosi have created.
Mr. Singletary, thank you, and we will get to the issue of abortion later in this debate. The first question, though, goes to Congressman Morelle, and it has to do with the defund police message. It's a refrain we heard from many protesters after the deaths of George Floyd and Daniel Prude. Now, you voted for the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, while the AP reports that act does not strip funds from police departments. Your opponent claims you did not counter that message of defunding police when it was at its highest pitch. And he has told voters that they should wonder, given that lack of response as he saw it, whether you would work to defund police in some way at some point. What's your response to that?
Well, Adam, thanks for the question. This is a refrain that keeps being reported by my opponent, but there's nothing that could be further from the truth. First and foremost, there's no question that I think everyone in this community cares deeply about the tragedy of violence on our city streets. I know I certainly do. We're working together, federal, state, and local government, to do everything we can to bring resources to bear to have an all-of-government response. I have never, ever sought to reduce funds for law enforcement. In fact, I have been a strong supporter throughout my career of resources for law enforcement, and I will continue to be. And the notion that we would somehow build a campaign on something that, although repeated many times, doesn't make it any more true. I'm going to continue to fight for resources. I have assured people throughout this community, and I will continue to do that throughout my career.
Congressman Morelle, thank you. Mr. Singletary, your 1-minute response.
Well, Joe Morelle can say that he was not for defunding the police, but a picture is worth 1,000 words. Joe Morelle sat down on Main Street with individuals who wanted to defund the police, while I was standing at the public safety building trying to quell a city that was burning, people were looting, police cars were being flipped. Joe Morelle was not only for defunding the police, but I also have a video of Joe Morelle saying that he was with individuals who said to defund the police. And I will put that video on social media as soon as we leave this debate stage. Joe Morelle is for defunding the police. And when I was in front of the public safety building, in front of the media, as police chief, I said that it will have an impact on black and brown communities. And sure enough, it did. We saw a 32% increase in homicides across this country, to include right here in Rochester. 81 homicides, 400 plus people shot. And this year, 64 homicides, 300 people shot. Joe Morelle is for defunding the police, and I will be for the police, to support the police.
Mr. Singletary, thank you.
If I might respond to that,
seconds.
I'll say it again, that to say something over and over again, which you know is not true, doesn't make it more true. I have always supported local law enforcement. I'll continue to. And frankly, the photograph that Mr. Singletary refers to, which I've seen on social media by many of his supporters, is a memorial that I was at to support George Floyd and to speak out against the horrific treatment that George Floyd experienced when he was murdered by people who have been since judged to be guilty and are in prison. I believe that Mr. Singletary would not agree that what happened to George Floyd is in any way right or correct. I hope he would stand with me against any forms of brutality, whether they by police or citizens, anybody who's advancing violence, we should have no tolerance for, zero tolerance. That's where I was. To build an entire campaign over something that's not true, I think is terribly unfortunate for the people of this community.
Mr. Singletary, would you like 30 seconds?
Yes, I sure would. Joe Morelle has a short-term memory. When I was chief of police, Joe Morelle never called me to say, Chief, what can I do for you? What assistance do you need? When our city was burning. His congressional district was burning. In fact, on May 30th, I stood in front of the public safety building and said George Floyd's murder, with many other police chiefs from Morelle County, and said it was a homicide, and said it was a murder. So Joe Morelle, again, I will play a video at the end of this debate, as soon as I leave this stage, where you say you are with individuals who want to defund the police.
Well, I think you've just answered the question that I raised, which is you're talking about the George Floyd incident, where I sat with others for 8 minutes, representative of the 8 minutes, where Mr. Floyd was murdered. You just said that you don't support what happened to George Floyd. I was there as a person making sure, and frankly, if this happened again tomorrow, I would do the same thing. I think everybody ought to be held accountable. I think that means the President of the United States, members of Congress, chiefs of police, average citizens. Holding people accountable is what we ought to be doing. In that case, I stood up as I would tomorrow if the same thing happened to anyone else in this country. But to somehow make that a suggestion that I have been in any way interested in reducing support for law enforcement is frankly a lie. You can repeat it over and over again. I know that's what the Republican Party nationally has become, your extreme friends who will continue to say things that aren't true in the hopes that somehow they'll convince people. But it's not true. There are no facts to support it.
Congressman Morelle, thank you. We're going to stick with this subject for just a minute, tangentially, but if you both want to make points that extend upon what you've already said, you're more than welcome. But this question is for Mr. Singletary. In the wake of Daniel Prude's death, an independent investigator came out with conclusions, and he talked about April 10th, 2020, in which you informed City Hall about the medical examiner's report. And that particular investigator found that you, quote, downgraded and mischaracterized the findings. And when I interviewed former Rochester Mayor Lovely Warren in September of 2020, she said this: Chief Singletary never informed me about the action of his officers to forcibly restrain Mr. Prude. At no time prior to August 4th did Chief Singletary or anyone make me aware or show me a video of the actions of the RPD officers involved in Prude's death. One could read her in those statements questioning your judgment and perhaps even your character. So what's your response to the investigation and to what Mayor Warren said back then?
Well, I would disagree with the investigation. I would say that throughout this process, I testified in front of a city council for 9 hours. I think the facts are out there, and I think the public has decided and will decide. You know, Daniel Prude's death was certainly tragic, but for anyone to think that I, as a black man, would try to cover up the death of another black man is horrendous. I grew up in these streets. I walked these streets. I patrolled these streets. I've served this community for 20 years. My mother walked the same streets that Daniel Prude walked. My mother was on drugs. There's no way that I, as a black man, would cover up the death of another black man. Daniel Prude's death was tragic. The highest law enforcement officer in the state of New York did an investigation and was transparent about that investigation.
Mr. Singletary, thank you. Congressman Morelle, you have a minute to respond.
Well, I'd say this. 6 months between the time Mr. Prude died is when it was finally revealed through the body camera footage that the family had to sue for. 6 months went by. There was no discussion publicly about his death in police custody. That's something that Mr. Singletary's police chief had responsibility for. It took him 6 months, and only, frankly, when it became public did he have to acknowledge it. And then, after it had been acknowledged, instead of simply saying, we might have handled this differently, or these are the reasons for the last 6 months, I didn't do anything to make this public, what does he do? He quits. In the middle of a crisis, abandoning the people in the city who had to rely on a police department in the middle of a very, very difficult time for our community, he walked away from his responsibilities and has never really answered any questions about what happened during those 6 months, about what the cause of death was, about what we should be doing. I agree. Daniel Prude's death was tragic, and there's so much that we can be doing. Mental health services, trying to provide more and more support for people. But the truth is, Mr. Singletary has never really answered all the questions that surround his activity why it took him 6 months to be able to say anything about the death of Mr. Prude, nor did he stand with us in the moment of crisis. Instead, he walked away.
All right, next question.
Adam, I like to.
30 seconds. Yep.
I find it very, very odd that Mr. Morelle wants to lend his voice to this situation now. You know, Mr. Morelle never picked up the phone during that time and called me. Not one time did he say, Chief, what can I do for you? Instead, what did he do? He went to go sit down on Main Street in a protest and say nothing about supporting the police. He was not supportive of the Rochester Police Department during that time. In fact, he called for the defunding of the police. So, I mean, for you to lend your voice right now to that incident, I think it's just very tragic, and I think it's a play on politics. And that's one of the reasons why I'm deciding to run for Congress in this district, because we have to stop putting politics over people.
Well, I'll just say it again. I'm sure Mr. Singletary is comfortable in the home with the Republican Party nationally that they are now, which is to say the same thing over and over, even when they know it's not true, but to just keep saying it over and over and over. It's how they've dealt with January 6th. It's how they've dealt with the Electoral College. It's how they deal with all the extreme issues that they're pushing, and that is to continue to say things that aren't true. And I hope, and I pray, and I have real confidence in the people in this community that they'll listen to the facts, they'll be aware, and they'll know that that's simply not true.
Congressman Morelle, this question is from the League of Women Voters. The truth of the matter is gun violence is out of control in our community. We had a 3-year-old shot the other day in Crossfire. This question again from the League: what federal legislation would you push for to support cities who are trying to combat the gun violence?
Well, as I said earlier, the tragedy of the violence on our streets and in many places around the country is something we need an all-of-government approach, and that's what we're doing. Over the last year or so, we've continued to work, and I've continued to work with the FBI, U.S. Marshals, Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, our mayor, Police Chief Smith, the county sheriff, the county executive, all of us working together, the governor, the state police, to do a number of things. First of all, to make sure that we have as many federal prosecutions as we possibly can. Those allow for a different, at our level of government, at the federal level, federal crimes have a different bail system, one that I think the state of New York ought to adopt. Secondly, I want to make sure that we deal with the illegal guns on our streets. This is a big difference between Mr. Singletary and I. I'm strongly for the elimination of semi-automatic assault weapons. I'm for universal background checks. I'm for greater regulations related to gun shops and people who are selling guns. These are the kinds of things we need to do in the short term. But long term, we need to invest in people. We need to make sure that families have hope, that families are out of despair, that families are invested in, and those are the kinds of things I'm going to continue to fight for.
Mr. Singletary, your 1-minute response.
This is totally campaign rhetoric from Joe Morelle. Joe Morelle can't even name 5 homicide victims in the city of Rochester. Adam, if Joe Morelle can name 5 homicide victims in the city of Rochester, I will be glad to yield 10 seconds of my time. I'll take his silence as that he cannot name 5 homicide victims. How about Javon Sampson? How about William Booker? How about, it's just Javon Sampson, William Booker, Anthony Mazurkowitz, Mary Smizer, Rashad Walker. Those are the names. Those are people. Those are lives. Not just statistics, Joe. Not just statistics. These are individuals who have been impacted by violence in this community. We have to stop putting people over, politics over people.
Well, I find this fascinating. I've listened now to Mr. Singletary. He's been running full-time now for a year for Congress. And yet I've not heard a single solitary thing that he intends to do about these issues. He's not for doing anything as it relates to the illegal guns on our streets. We have 400 million guns in the United States. 400 million. We don't have that many men, women, and children. And yet he'll do nothing. In fact, recently said he'd open the door and consider having fully automatic weapons on our streets, allowing citizens to have fully automatic weapons, things that have been banned for decades. He's open to bringing them in, as though additional guns, higher capacity guns, will somehow solve the violence problem on our streets. And what other suggestions has he made? I haven't heard a single one. So it's easy to point out problems. It's easy to point to all the challenges we face. And I understand that. It's frustrating. We're all frustrated. But we're working together to try to bring around a change, transformation in our community. But it's going to take hard work, and it's going to take solutions, not just complaints, not just pointing out the shortcomings of whatever you feel is happening. So let's talk about gun control. Let's talk about investing in our people. Let's talk about investing in children. Let's talk about all the things we need to do to make this community safer, something I'm very, very committed to, something I'm working with all my partners in government to achieve.
A gentle reminder, these responses are these extra 30 seconds. So, Mr. Singletary, I'm going to give you a minute here to respond if you'd like.
Thank you. Let's talk about enforcing the laws that are currently on the books. Let's talk about working with the Department of Justice to work with our federal prosecutors, because the system in New York is broken. A system, bail reform, less is more, something that you have remained silent on the entire time. I wonder why you want to lend your voice to it now, because there's an election coming, because there was a debate tonight. You want to talk about the zip code 14605. We are, nearly half of all the children in Rochester live in poverty. We are the second worst congressional district to live in for African Americans. Joe Morelle has been silent on the issue of crime. He wanted to defund the police. We have 81 homicides last year, over 400 plus people shot. 64 homicides this year with 300 plus people shot. Joe Morelle's voice has been silent on this issue, and that is why the people will pick a new representative this election on November 8th.
All right, Mr.
So there
Singletary.
we go. I just want to point out, there we go again, an opportunity for Mr. Singletary to say anything that he would do at the federal level, and there's no answer. It's just Joe Morelle this, Joe Morelle that. Look, I think these are tragedies. I spend a lot of time talking to my partners in government about what we are doing, about federal prosecution. We've had 28 federal prosecutions in just the last 6 weeks. Those are things where federal crimes will get people put behind bars, and they'll have to pay the price. That's something I continue to push for. I wrote to the Attorney General of the United States. I've spoken at length with the U.S. Attorney for the Western District. These are things that we're working for and have been working for months and months and months. Yet what are we going to hear? Just the things that Joe Morelle apparently doesn't do. But what are the solutions? I've just mentioned 3 or 4 things that I'm working to do. Mr. Singletary, not a single one.
All right, we're going to end this 30 seconds to Mr. Singletary.
Joe Morelle, how can you pretend to have solutions when you not even talk to the people in the communities who are infected by the violence that occurs every single day? We need to stop with these sound bites that sound good for TV and these accusations that you continue to spew, and start working on behalf of the people here in the 25th Congressional District, because you continue to be an empty suit for the people right here in Rochester. You pander to the community, you pander to people in the city of Rochester, but do nothing for them. You come around every 2 years to ask for their vote, but nothing changes. Again, we are the second worst congressional district to live in for African Americans, and nearly half of all our children live in poverty. And we have a surging crime rate. And in fact, when you talk about accountability, that's what we're lacking today right now in New York State. People need to be prosecuted and held accountable when they break the law, just like you were prosecuted and held accountable when you broke the law.
Okay, Mr. Singletary, you did address something extra there, so I will give 30 seconds to Congressman Morelle, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, I appreciate this conversation around children in poverty. I was one of the strong supporters of child tax credit, which, had we been allowed to make it permanent, would have lifted half of the children in this country, half of the children in Rochester, out of poverty. You know who stopped the child tax credit from being extended? The Republican Party, the extreme Republican Party that Mr. Singletary not only belongs to, but just joined. I mean, I talked to friends who are Republicans for decades who are angry about what's happened at the national level. Mr. Singletary joined the Republican Party after the extremists took over. Child tax credit would have removed half of the kids in America out of poverty. Republican Party, no, we're not going to do that. So again, are there any solutions here, or are we just going to point fingers and talk about all the things in the world that are wrong? How about join me in pushing the Republicans in Congress to extend the child tax credit and lift children out of poverty?
All right, Congressman, thank you. Mr. Singletary, this question is from the League of Women Voters. And it goes, you describe yourself as pro-life, and you talked about in your opening statement just now, pregnant women should have options. But just to be clear, when you say that you're pro-life, does that mean as a congressman you would vote to make sure abortion is not one of those options?
Look, as I said earlier, I am for making sure that all women, especially black women, make sure that they have the information and help and resources they need to make a choice they want to make, not a choice that they're forced into. And Joe Morelle has been a part of a social economic system that believes that their only choice is to kill their unborn child. Look, Joe Morelle has tried to paint me as extreme. I'm not the extreme one. Joe Morelle believes in abortion all the way up until birth. In fact, 90% of Americans believe that there should be some sort of restriction on abortion. He is the extreme one. You know, Joe Morelle has been lying throughout this whole entire campaign about me when it comes to abortion. He, in fact, is the extreme one on abortion.
Before we go over to Congressman Morelle, I just want to make sure, would you vote to ban abortion at a federal level?
I would not vote to ban abortion at the federal level. I am not for a nationwide ban on abortion. The Supreme Court has been clear. It is given back to the states, not 9 justices on the Supreme Court, where the people would not be able to lobby their representatives for a choice that they want. Again, I am not for a nationwide ban on abortion like Joe Morelle has tried to paint me out to be. I am for making sure that all women, especially black women, is allowed to have the choice that they want to make. Because when you look at the numbers, for every 100 black babies that are born in Morrow County, 59 are aborted. For every 100 white babies that are born, 14 are aborted. Now, when you talk about disparity against black and white, let's not only talk about it when it benefits you. Let's make abortion part of that conversation, because the policies that you support are against black families, are against black babies, because you've been silent about the crime on the streets of Rochester, and let's start talking about being equal when he talks about abortion.
Mr. Singletary, thank you. Congressman Morelle, I allowed Mr. Singletary to go a little long, so a minute and a half to you to respond to that.
Well, I can't imagine a more fundamental issue than the question of women's reproductive rights. The Supreme Court, in the Dobbs decision overturning Roe, made one of the worst decisions in the history of the court. And I have been pro-choice my entire career. And that means letting the decision be made by women. That's where it should be made, not by their government, but let the most intimate decision a person can make. Let them make that decision. For 50 years in the United States, that was the path we chose. It was settled law, according to Brett Kavanaugh. So let me be clear. And frankly, I can't tell what Mr. Singletary's position is. It's changed so many times since the beginning of this campaign. But let me be clear about where I am. I am going to oppose, with every fiber of my being, a national abortion ban, which is promoted by the Republicans in Washington, the extreme Republicans that Mr. Singletary wants to join. Over 160 members of the House and Senate have signed on to bills to create a national abortion ban. I will oppose that in every single way. And I will continue to support a Women's Reproductive Health Act, which codifies Roe, puts into law all the protections that women in this country deserve. And frankly, doing this state by state is such a disservice to the women in Texas, in Mississippi, and other places in this country where if they fear, or they come to New York to seek abortion services. And you know what that does to the quality of health care for New Yorkers? It makes it more difficult, because you're going to see an influx of people who are leaving because they and their doctors can't operate in places around this country where they don't have that choice. This is fundamental. There can't be a more important issue than this, and I'm going to make sure that people know what my position is every single step of the way. It hasn't changed over the decades, and I frankly can't really understand where Mr. Singletary's position is. It's kind of pro-choice, it's kind of pro-life, it's kind of this, it's kind of that. This is too important an issue to have this kind of indecision.
Mr. Singletary, 30 seconds.
I agree with Mr. Morelle. It is an important issue. That's why I'm for allowing all women, especially black women, to make sure that they have the resources and the help that they need to make a choice they want to make. My position has been very clear throughout this campaign, not like your lies that you've been telling throughout this campaign. Quite frankly, whatever Joe Morelle lips moves, the truth just can't find its way out of his mouth.
Well, I'll just say once again, I find offensive the notion that you think women need to get information from you or from the government to decide what's in their interests. I don't think women need information. What they need is freedom to act in the way that's best for them and for their family. That's what this has been for the last 50 years. My 86-year-old mother had more reproductive rights than my children and my grandchildren have. It is unconscionable that we do this, and I'm going to continue to fight every single day to make sure women in this country have the choice to make the decision over their own bodies.
Okay, real quick, Mr. Singletary, 30 seconds, then we have to take a break so your moderator can get some water.
If you talk about a choice, choice means having options, not just the choice that you want people to make. It's about you want people to have the only alternative is to kill their unborn child. A choice is about having options, alternatives. I want women to make sure that they have all the information and the help that they need to make that choice. I've been a police officer for 20 years. I've interviewed women who have been sexually assaulted where a child has been conceived. I would never ask a woman to carry a burden that they wouldn't want. Again, I'm personally pro-life. I am personally pro-life.
All right.
Well,
Mr.
and just to be
Singletary.
clear, giving people choice, being pro-choice, means allowing women to make this decision. I'm not making the decision for them. I would never think that someone in the government should make that decision for women. That's what pro-choice means, allowing women to make that decision, make the choice, not the government doing it, not the
Congressman,
state of
thank you.
Texas or the state of Mississippi, or maybe someday the state of New York. That can't be the answer. That is pro-choice.
Congressman, thank you. Mr. Singletary, thank you. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we have some big issues to get to, including inflation and election law. Stay with us. Thank you for rejoining us for this debate for the 25th Congressional District. Congressman Joe Morelle, this question is from you. It has to do with inflation. It's very real. It's harming everyday Americans out there, whether they're going to the grocery store or shopping for clothes. Many Republicans, some economists, they blame the Democrats' spending by the Biden administration for pumping this up, fueling inflation. Do you believe that Democrats or yourself hold any responsibility for what's happening now?
Well, I think during the last 2 years, actually even a little before that, when the COVID crisis began, I think we in Congress, working with both the Trump administration and the Biden administration, made sure that we were putting resources into the country during the midst of the crisis. So we continue to work on how to reduce prices for families. You know, I talk to neighbors all the time about the challenges they face. It's very real, and we're working very hard to bring down prices. For instance, we just passed a bill which is going to reduce for the first time Medicaid out-of-pocket expenses for senior citizens who struggle to pay for drug prices. First time in the 57-year history of Medicare that we will be negotiating drug prices and lowering them. And we also reduced the cost of insulin to $35 a month. But there's other things. I led the charge to pass surprise billing legislation to make sure that citizens don't have to pay for surprises in medical bills that they didn't anticipate. We passed the child tax credit to reduce the cost for families. Unfortunately, Republicans in Congress stopped that from being made permanent. Likewise, we tried to reduce the cost of child care, something families are struggling with every single day. We made sure that we invest in early childhood education. Again, these are all things that help families with inflated prices. And finally, going after the oil companies who have record profits this year in the face of some of the most difficult times that we faced around energy prices. We're going to continue to fight. I'm going to do everything I can every single day to reduce the cost of living in our community and across the country.
Real quick, before we get to Mr. Singletary, do you think that the spending we've seen over the last 2 years has impacted inflation at all?
So I think the investments we needed to make were to repair this country, to help small businesses through the PPP program, to help people every single day during this crisis. So those investments had to be made, and we'll continue to make investments. I do note the bill we just passed just a few weeks ago will reduce the deficit by $300 billion. That's a way to address some of the challenges we face. But we need to make investments in people. This is the kind of thing that you do in moments of crisis. Is what we did during the New Deal. And this will, in the long term, is going to benefit all the citizens of this country. We just have to keep working at it and lower costs at the same time.
Mr. Singletary, my apologies. I did give Congressman Morelle a little extra time, so a minute and a half for your response, please.
Thank you, Adam. Let's be clear. The Inflation Reduction Act does nothing right now to reduce inflation. It's great that people are going to pay lower costs for prescription drugs, but they're paying 60% more for a dozen eggs. Adam, I will yield 10 seconds of my time again. If Joe Morelle can tell me what if the inflation rate was when he took office 2 years ago, when him and Joe Biden raised their right hand to assume their next term. Inflation, Joe,
you want to cede your time to me? I'm happy to take it. Here's the challenge. We face inflation.
Only if you answer the question. If you answer the question, that wasn't the question.
Why don't you talk about, give your ideas of what you're going to do to combat inflation. I'd love to hear one idea. We've been at this now for about 40 minutes. I haven't heard a single idea.
Here's what we need to do.
About anything.
Here's what we need to do. We need to stop the reckless spending that you've been supporting that is hurting the people right here in this congressional district. Inflation, since you don't want to answer the question, I'll be transparent with the American people and with the voters here in New York 25. When you took office 2 years ago, inflation was 1.4%. Today, it is 8.3%. The price of eggs have gone up 60%. Everything has gone up. I'm glad he mentioned energy. We need to get back to being energy independent in this country because everything that we do involves energy. The farmers growing food, agricultural industry is costing them more. Inflation is costing everyone more. And what we need to do is rein in the spending, the reckless spending that Joe Morelle and Nancy Pelosi have supported in Congress. That's what we need to do. We need to get back to making things right here in America and stop depending on other countries like Saudi Arabia and Iran and stop making deals with those entities who are our enemies and when it comes to foreign policy. So we need to hold people accountable. We need to hold people accountable. And holding people accountable is what the voters will do this November because Joe Morelle's policies and Nancy Pelosi's policies have cost the voters right here in this congressional district everything.
All right, the next question is for Mr. Singletary. In response to January 6th, we are now seeing some legislation work its way through Congress that would update the Electoral Count Act. It's 135 years old. This would update it. And essentially, in the eyes of its supporters, this would remove any question as to how electoral votes should be counted. Would you vote for the recent piece of legislation, the update that passed the House, should it come back to the floor? Mr. Singletary.
Well, Adam, I would have to do some more research with regards to what this legislation is about. When you talk about January 6th, again, we have to hold people accountable. We have to hold people accountable, just like Joe Morelle was held accountable when he broke the law. So again, Adam, I would have to do some more research on this legislation before I gave an answer as to what's in the bill, because apparently in Washington, D.C. right now, what they do is they're not having good government. We need a checks and balance on government. They're just passing bills, bypassing committees, and not even having good debate. As a representative, what I would do is have a good discussion, go to Congress, be able to respect one another, reason with one another, and then bring results back to the district. And part of that is having a good debate on the House floor, and after you have heard from your constituents. We have had some of the largest bills passed within the last couple of years under Joe Morelle's watch. And how many town halls have Joe Morelle held to get the voice of the voter right here in this congressional district? Congressman
Morelle.
Yeah, it's shocking to me that someone would run for Congress for a full year, full time, and not have an idea of whether or not we should make changes to ensure the Electoral College continues to be safeguarded. We had a riot on January 6th. I was there, overrun by thousands of people, some with the intent of killing the Vice President of the United States. 5 people died as a result of the activities on January 6th, including Capitol Police officers. Those were intended to overturn the peaceful transfer of power. Mr. Singletary's been at this for a year. The presidential elections 2 years ago. I bet you can't even get him to say whether he thinks Joe Biden was elected in 2020. Refuses to talk about it. Can you imagine something more fundamental? Can you imagine something more foundational to this democracy than fair elections? Right now, you have Republicans talking about making sure that in individual states, the popular vote doesn't count, and that you can install whatever electors you want to do. It is unbelievable that the most fundamental thing that we have, support of the Constitution, support of the rule of law, is something that Republicans can't even talk about in the extreme agenda that they have. So I'll ask Mr. Singletary, did Joe Biden win the election in 2020? Fairly win the election?
All right, just real quick, I just want to go back to the rules. Congressman, thank you. Both candidates have agreed not to ask each other questions. They've both done so. We're going to let that slide and move forward. On that note, though, I will direct to Mr. Singletary this question. Have you seen any legitimate evidence to support the argument made by some Republicans that the election was stolen?
I have not seen any legitimate evidence. And I have said President Biden is the President of the United States. So I don't know what Joe Morelle is talking about, but I have not come out and said that. There Joe Morelle goes again. You know, his lips are moving, and the truth just can't seem to find its way out.
Well, you know what Mr. Singletary does? He does what the Republicans in Washington do all the time. Joe Biden is president. That's not the question. The question isn't whether Joe Biden's president. It's obvious he's the president of the United States. The question is, was the election stolen in 2020? I'm not asking Mr. Singletary. Mr. Chodak, I wish you would ask him. But it'd be nice if he had a straight answer once on these kind of questions. This doesn't get more fundamental about American democracy than whether the election was fairly held. And frankly, there is zero evidence that suggests the election was stolen. Yet 50% of Republicans in New York State think it was. You know why? Because the extreme Republicans in Washington and the National Republican Party are convincing people that there was fraud when it didn't exist. It's a lie. And Mr. Singletary should say, Joe Biden fairly won this election.
Congressman, thank you. Mr. Singletary.
There goes Joe Morelle again, spreading lies, telling the untruth. Look, I've said it over and over again. President Biden is the President of the United States. Joe Morelle tries to paint me as an extreme Republican. Joe, I know you have short-term memory, but just a year ago, I was a Democrat. I was a Democrat. I left the Democratic Party because you were not able to stand up for the far leftist positions that the Democratic Party has taken. The Democratic Party is no longer the party of my parents or grandparents. And we live in a great country where you can choose to pick a different party if your party, the party that you're aligned with no longer aligns with your values.
All right.
So just to be clear, joining the Republican Party when they had just made the decision, 147 members of the House, to overturn the 2020 election. And yet again, Mr. Singletary won't say that Joe Biden won this election fairly. I've heard him say that he's the president. I've said this over and over. We all acknowledge he's the president. Was he elected? Was all the charges about this election being stolen and fraud? Is that true? I would argue that there's no evidence. Joe Biden was elected president of the United States, and the Republican Party would have to acknowledge it. That's the party you join, the extreme Republican Party. The people that you support, the people that you talk to on your Twitter feed are all part of the extreme Republican agenda. And yet you can't answer a simple question.
Congressman
Joe
Morelle,
Biden was elected.
Thank you. We want to
I do believe I did answer the question when Adam asked me, well, did I see any legitimate evidence that the election was stolen? And I said no.
All right, thank you. Mr. Singletary, Congressman Morelle, this question is from you. It's from the League of Women Voters. We just did a story about how our healthcare systems here in Rochester are overwhelmed, not just by the gun violence, but also after the pandemic. We have nursing home residents being boarded in the ED. We have huge wait times in the waiting rooms. It's potentially decreasing the quality of healthcare in our region. What would you propose doing over the next term to help with this?
Is that a question for me, Ann?
Yes, I apologize. Congressman Morelle from the League of Women Voters.
Look, I think what we did during the pandemic was the right thing to do. We worked very hard at getting resources to our healthcare systems. I talked to the head of University of Rochester Medical Center as well as Rochester Regional on a daily basis. You know, it's easy to sort of criticize responses to the pandemic, but if you think back to March of 2020 when the virus was still in its nascent stage, we were not sure what the danger was to the public. We did everything we could, the Trump administration and the Congress, to come together to try to provide support. There's a lot that we need to do now. We have to continue to improve our efforts to get more staff in our hospitals and nursing homes. We need to get additional dollars into our healthcare systems. We need to continue to use telehealth, which emerged during the pandemic, which can be a real cost savings to people and expand services to people in urban settings as well as rural settings. So there's a lot more to do. I am very, very involved in working with our healthcare systems to make sure that the response continues to be appropriate. And we have a lot of work to do. There's no question about it. And labor shortages are something that I'm acutely focused on.
In the interest of time, I'm going to give a minute and a half to Mr. Singletary because I do want to get to two final questions that don't fully involve politics. So, Mr. Singletary, a minute and a half for you on this question. What would you do to address the struggling healthcare systems?
Well, I'll tell you one thing. When you talk about the pandemic, I think we should follow the science. You know, Joe Morelle, I'm glad he brought up labor shortage, because during this pandemic, right here in New York and many places across the country, we made heroes zeros when you talk about healthcare workers. So I believe that's some of the staff shortages that we've seen. I think that's part of it. Firing healthcare workers who deserve to get their job back. Just today, and even over yesterday, President Biden praised the Coast Guard, the U.S. Coast Guard, for bringing people out of Hurricane Ian. But yet, these same Coast Guard who helped save people in Hurricane Ian out in Florida are going to be fired, are going to lose their job of serving the people in the United States military. They're going to be fired because they refuse to get vaccinated. Heroes one day, zeros the next, just like you did with our police officers.
Congressman Morelle, would you like to respond to that?
I'm not sure how to respond to that. I don't think there was a cogent sentence in there. I don't know what the answer was. I'm talking about providing resources to our healthcare systems. I'm talking about expanding telehealth. I'm talking about making sure that people enter and that we address the workforce shortage. Those are all ideas that I've worked on in addition to the surprise billing legislation, in addition to reducing prescription drug costs, in addition to making sure that senior citizens don't pay out of their pocket more than $2,000 a year, reducing the cost of insulin. Those are all the things that I'm going to continue to work on to improve our healthcare system and to continue to work with all of our partners in healthcare to make sure they have the resources they need.
Mr. Singletary?
If Joe Morelle calls what he's continuing to work on what we have today, we don't want it, Joe. We don't want it. Our seniors are being crushed by inflation. Families are being crushed by inflation. The people who live in the city of Rochester who have been ignored under your leadership are being crushed by violence and inflation and in healthcare.
Mr. Singletary, thank you. I do want to get to these next two questions. We've gone back and forth about policies and whatnot, but this is on a personal side. So, Congressman Morelle, we're going to start with you. Your daughter, Lauren, died of cancer a few years ago, 5 years ago now. How has that influenced you as a congressman?
Well, I think first and foremost, it's influenced me as an individual. I am part of a fraternity that no one wants to be a member of, and that's to lose a child. It has really redoubled my efforts as a person and as a representative to do everything I can to make sure families don't have to go through what Mary Beth and I had to go through and our boys. So I work very hard working with the White House on the cancer moonshot. That's why I work so hard in the healthcare system to make sure that people have access to the best and the brightest in terms of physicians and providers, as well as the best health care we can have. And that's why I work so hard with Prude Cancer Center, Wilmot Cancer Center, trying to make it a national cancer institute, and I've been leading the effort towards that. So, you know, I think for me, it was a very, very obviously difficult time. You don't get over it. The best you do is to try to pick up and go on and make something meaningful out of it.
Congressman, thank you. Mr. Singletary, when I interviewed you a few years ago, I asked you if there were any cases that stood out to you, and you told me many years ago, I believe it was early on in your career at the Rochester Police Department, you had to work a scene in which a young boy had been shot and killed. Can you talk to me about how that impacted your outlook and perhaps reaches into where you are today?
Sure thing, Adam. The young boy that you talk about is Tyshawn Caldwell. When I was a police officer, he was one of almost the first homicides that I went to. I was working on the west side of the city, in the northwest part of the city. Tyshawn Caldwell was a 10-year-old who was shot due to senseless violence in our community. And we continue to see that senseless violence today. You know, I'm a person who, you know, wants to continue to serve and meet people where they are. And you have to look at each one of these victims of homicides and the people in our community as people. They're not just statistics, they are actual lives with families who are hurting. And throughout my 20 years as a police officer, when you receive that phone call, and particularly when you were chief of police, when you receive that phone call in the middle of the night about a loved one who has passed away or a member of this community, it hits you different. But when it's a 10-year-old child, it's a sad time in our community when that happens.
Mr. Singletary, thank you. We do have time for one more question real quick, so we're going to make this very brief, a minute apiece. Mr. Singletary, this for you. Should we be doing more, less, or the same when it comes to the U.S. involvement in the war in Ukraine?
I'll tell you what, I think one of the things that we must do is we must use all diplomatic efforts. All diplomatic efforts. I think we must be fiscally responsive when it talks about helping out Ukraine. You know, what happened to Ukraine is a terrible situation. So we need to do all we can to help Ukraine as they are our partners. One of the things that we must do also is we must make sure that we are not the only player in the game. As the United States, when the United States is strong on the world stage, the world is better. And what we have to do is we have to make sure that we are pushing our allies, in Congress to make, across the globe to help out with this situation. And again, diplomacy should always be the answer that we're trying to look for.
Mr. Singletary, thank you. Congressman Morelle, 1 minute. Should we stay the course? Where should we go with this?
Thank you. I think we have really met the challenge, and I think the President and the Congress are in lockstep on this. We've devoted $15 billion both in lethal aid and humanitarian aid to Ukraine, and they have been so incredibly courageous and resilient, the people of Ukraine. And we have been there with them. And not only have we been there with them, we have united NATO. We've added to NATO with Finland and Sweden. Those are countries that have joined NATO. We've made it larger, we've made it more resilient, and we're going to continue our efforts in Congress. We will continue to support the Ukrainian people, their drive to maintain their sovereignty and self-governance. This is one of the most vital fights that we face in the world. I wish there was a diplomatic solution. President Putin is frankly a monster. He has done illegal warfare against the people of Ukraine, and the United States has got to be firm in its resolve. We have been. I will continue to support the people of Ukraine as long as it takes, no matter how long it takes.
Congressman Morelle, the next question, and perhaps the final one, is going to be directed to you. We have seen gun violence on the streets of Rochester, and the country has seen gun violence within its schools. What would you propose moving forward in the next 2 years?
Well, I'll continue the push that I've made for decades now to make sure that semi-automatic assault weapons are illegal in the United States, to make sure we have universal background checks so everyone who's a gun owner can make sure that they have the background check to prove that they're appropriate in having a lethal weapon. I have continued to advocate and sponsor the Gun Theft Prevention Act, which would require increased standards for people who sell weapons, who are gun owners. You know, we have more restrictions on pharmacies than we do on gun shops in the United States. 400 million guns and counting. The number keeps going up. And that's to account for the violence on our streets. So we'll continue to move, and I'll continue to do everything that I can to make sure our streets are safer and that we get illegal guns off the streets. And I would encourage Mr. Singletary to retract something he said a couple of weeks ago, that he's open to having fully automatic weapons be available to people in the United States, something that's been banned for decades. This is, particularly when it comes to law enforcement, a real danger. We have to move, and we have to move quickly.
Mr. Singletary, your 1-minute response, and then we have to move to closing statements.
Thank you. I think the Supreme Court has been clear with regard to citizens being able to protect themselves and bear arms. You know, the Second Amendment was meant for a reason. It was meant because Kathy Hochul and Joe Morelle are doubling down against what the Supreme Court just ordered this year. People have a right to defend themselves. We can talk about what tool that can or cannot be used. We agree that you can't drive down the street in a tank. We agree that you can't have a grenade launcher. But the founders or framers were very clear with the Second Amendment and the Constitution. And what we need to do also is focus on mental health. We need to invest in mental health in this country. As a law enforcement officer, I can tell you that I've never seen a gun discharge itself. So we need to talk about the people who are behind the gun, where there are a lot of precipitating factors that occur prior to the incident happening. We also need to enforce the laws that are currently on the books. We need to enforce the laws that are currently on the books and not do what Joe Morelle and Kathy Hochul has done, which is make law-abiding citizens criminals.
All right. Mr. Singletary, thank you. We do have closing statements. Unfortunately, there's been a timing issue. What we're going to do is we're going to record those after this debate, and we're going to air them tonight on News 8 at 11. So the closing statements from Congressman Morelle and Mr. Singletary on News 811 and at rochesterfirst.com. I want to thank both candidates for joining us this evening, and I want to thank our live audience who, as promised, they can express their enthusiasm once again for the candidates right now. And remember, Election Day is Tuesday, November 8th. Remember to get out and vote. For more information on the races, you can head to rochesterfirst.com. Thank you so much. Have a great night.